what so many people are doing now, which sets them up for failure for their day, is they wake up late, they're running crazy all over the house, they're jumping into their car, racing through traffic,
Yes.
cursing people out on the way.
I didn't curse anybody out on the way. I just want you guys to know that.
But it's no way to start your day. And then how are you going to show up? You may have really good intentions, but your impact is not going to be as clear and powerful.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Renew Podcast. I am your host, Kristen Andre, and as always, we are here to help you reclaim your business and your life without losing your edge. And with me today to talk all things mindful leadership is the amazing Angela Buttimer. Thank you for being here with me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kristen.
I'm excited because I have had the opportunity to watch you. You do a lot of speaking. You've been on TEDx stages. You're on Good Day Atlanta and Fox here frequently.
Yes.
And I've met you through some other events. So I'm excited to hear what all you have to say about mindful leadership, because I coach a lot of leaders and we talk about leadership so much, but we don't often take a moment to speak about mindful leadership. So tell me how you really started focusing on that, because you're a leadership expert, a psychotherapist. You've got a lot of history in this industry.
I do. And I really got turned on to mindfulness. It wasn't called this back then, when I was a teenager, where I learned to meditate. And it has just served me well ever since. And I was just so passionate about it. I saw what it did for me and then my clients. So I just want to keep spreading the message out there. And I think when we're talking about mindful leadership, we got to back it up a little bit, Kristen, and think about mindfulness. Because some people are confused about that, right? And they think mindfulness is some sort of a hippy-dippy-doo, airy-fairy practice.
I call it woo-woo, because I think, when you said you started meditating younger, and when people would talk about meditation, I'm like, I can't meditate, it's too much. And they're like, well, you're probably the person that needs to. But we don't learn that young. I'm surprised that you started that young, because it wasn't kind of the thing to do.
I'm really grateful that my parents, they were super into personal development and professional development, and they are the ones that taught me. And so, for mindfulness, it's really backed in science and neuroscience. But a lot of people still think, I'm just going to get so zenned out. I'm just going to lose my edge. And that's why I like to call it mindful mojo, because mindfulness actually builds your confidence and your resilience, and it energizes you. It helps you focus. And so I like to bring that home to people.
So how do you help people understand? Because when I think of mindfulness and meditation, it's kind of that zen, and I just think of people being half asleep. I mean, I think I've embraced it in recent years, so I understand, but I'd love to hear from you, because this is your work.
Yes.
How do you help people kind of get over that, especially leaders? Because you work with a lot of leaders, which we'll get into. Yeah. How do you help them start to embrace the need to be more mindful?
Well, I'm sure you've seen this too, this sort of evolving leadership model. So old school used to be very authoritarian leadership, and then it kind of switched over into sort of laissez-faire, enabling leadership.
Yes.
Neither are effective.
They're terrible.
They're
Both
terrible.
of them are awful.
Yeah. And so mindful leadership for me just hits that sweet spot, right? It really is a part of practicing presence, but it also helps our leaders focus, be better communicators, and lead better.
Well, and I think so many times in companies and whether they're big or small, it was that old school authoritarian. Yeah. You do this because I said so, which is kind of the same thing with parenting.
Yes.
So I think it all translates over. But
True.
In leadership, especially in companies, if they're not present, nothing gets done. I mean, I'm hearing too many of my executives that I coach, and I'm sure you do the same in your practice. It's just they're running around busy all the time, and they're never really present.
Putting out fires, being pulled in many different directions. And I have a lot of empathy for leaders, because more is being required every day of them. But you've got to practice presence if you want people to follow you.
So how do you advise somebody, a leader that is trying to be more present, but has all the fires to put out, 50,000 meetings on their calendars, and how do you advise it? Where do they start?
Yes. So in mindfulness and mindful leadership, there are practices that you can utilize, and one size doesn't fit all. Right. And then there are principles about how you move through the world. Mindful leaders are really good at self-awareness and building that skill set, that acumen, and self-regulation. You have to be able to respond to stress skillfully and regulate yourself with all of the demands that are going to always happen for a leader.
Well, and I think a lot of times the the self-awareness is big. And a lot of, it's funny to me how few leaders have that naturally. Because, to grow in a company and to advance in a company, there's tons of assessments being done. We do them, the experts do them, I've done them. A lot of leaderships in C-suite have the 360s done. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're aware of that. The information may have been presented to them, but how do you get people to kind of absorb it?
It takes practice, and everyone is not cut out to be a leader, and that's what I see a lot in my work, and I'm sure you do too, that sometimes you have an individual contributor that's doing really well at performing their job, but they're not able to lead people. That's a whole different hat. So this person has to be able to gain insight into themselves, and if they can't, they really need to step out of the leadership role.
I think that's key because my background's in finance, and I had the opportunity to interview a lot of people that were moving up in the leadership program. I was one of their interviewers, and it was always interesting to me because what would happen is somebody would do well in finance or in any sales career, and they're like, oh, they're a great salesperson. Let's put them in leadership. But they were terrible at, it was almost like they were in this little silo. They did well, they executed well, but they weren't good at empowering other people or really listening and being present with other people.
Yes, even in the meetings, you'll see some leaders, they're on their phone, they're constantly being distracted, and they're not listening, as you're saying, and really paying attention.
So with this mindful leadership, if somebody is listening and they want to pay more attention to their employees, their coworkers, their spouse, their children, whatever it is, because that's all leading.
Yes.
How do they start? Like, what is step one? What's your process with people to kind of walk them through?
Well, let's get into a little bit of the neuroscience, which is going to
lead. I love the neuroscience part.
But it's going to lead us to meditation because
here we go. We're back to meditation. It's all coming back to meditation here.
And there are many ways to meditate. So if anybody ever tells you there's this one way and that's it, just run. Go the other way.
That surprised me because I was the one going, I can't do this. I can't do this. And as you know, I came off a yoga meditation retreat with our friend Lisa recently, and I would have 3 years ago said there is no way you're going to get me to meditate because I kind of always pictured it as we got to sit crisscross applesauce or whatever we call it now, and our fingers are out like this, but that's really not what it is.
You can do it that way, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
So there is sitting meditation, but there's walking meditation, there's moving meditation, yoga.
There is sitting in a hot bubble bath meditation.
There is, exactly. So there's lots of ways to reach that meditative state, and what happens when you meditate is you change your brain, and that's neuroplasticity. And so when you change your brain in these positive ways, you're better able to regulate your stress. You're a better communicator, a better leader.
How long does it take when you say neuroplasticity? I mean, that to me is like it's stretchy and it's molding and it's bending. But how long does it take for that to stick?
Just a few weeks if your practice is consistent.
Okay.
So consistency is key. That's what I tell everyone. A little bit goes a long way. So a lot of people will avoid meditating because they think they have to do it for an hour or even 30 minutes, and you don't.
Yeah.
Just a few minutes each day goes a long way.
That's doable for most people because, I think to carve out an hour to sit in silence or however you decide to meditate, that's scary for a lot of people. It's very intimidating.
And sometimes I'll suggest to people if they're really scared or just resistant, start off with 2 minutes. And then do 2 minutes for a month and then bump it to 3 or 4. Just start small and you'll get there.
So once you do that, is that what you're referring to as you call it the mindful mojo? Like is that just being able to do it over and over again, or is that more of a mindset once you've been able to get there? Does that have to do with meditation, or is it?
No, it's an ongoing process because as human beings, we have different seasons of our lives that impact us differently, and we have fluctuations of consciousness that we need to pay attention to. And so sometimes we've got to go back to our meditation in the afternoon even to say, okay, you know what? I need a reset so that I can walk into this meeting with confidence and capability. Because sometimes by 2 or 3, we're exhausted. We've had so many things happen, but we've got this important meeting that we have to take care of.
Do you ever advise people to, and I hate this word, I'm going to say it, and I hate it because it's overused. And anytime a word starts to get overused, I start to dislike it.
I get it.
There are certain things that trigger us. I don't like the word trigger, but there are certain things that trigger us. People, situations. Yeah. Do you ever advise your clients and the leaders you're working with to do something specific to help with that or that person? Because I'm thinking of leaders. I have a couple of my coaching clients now that there are certain people on their in the C-suite that they trigger them. And I know as soon as they go into a meeting with them, they're heightened, their shields up, they're in a really heightened state. Yeah, so can they apply that here?
Absolutely. And, I do a whole thing on dealing with difficult people, and who is difficult for me may not be difficult for you, Kristen, right?
Right.
And so each his own. But that self-regulation, going back to that, being able to regulate and say, you know what, I really don't prefer this person's approach, but I'm good, I'm okay, I can breathe, I can sit here, I can listen. I don't have to get triggered, as you say, by a personality that's not my preference.
Yeah. I think that's so important to remember because we spend so much time in the work environment, for those people that are working, and that we're trying to change people when really the only thing we have control over. I'm a big control the controllables person. The only thing we have control over is ourselves. Yeah. So if we can spend the time doing things like this, and I mean that's a lot of your work is helping people do this because it just doesn't come natural.
For some people it does, and they are the fortunate few.
Yeah,
they are not. There are some people.
There is not any of those in my friend group. I can assure. Well, actually, no, I take that back. There's like one or two.
Yes,
but it doesn't. I think for most of us, it doesn't come naturally. Did
it
come naturally to you? I know you said you meditated as a child.
It did. Yeah, it came pretty naturally. So I was very fortunate. Okay. And so it is those practices like meditation, but it is also intentionality. How do I want to show up this day? Who do I want to be, and what qualities do I need to develop in order to show up as this mindful leader, this person who wants to have impact in the world, in the workplace?
I wonder how many people sit back and really think about that. Really think about, okay, how am I showing up? Because so many of us, my big thing right now, and the book we're working on now is about being less busy and more present. It's just trying to figure out, we're running so hard that I'm almost as big of a Gary Vaynerchuk fan and Whitney, my frequent co-host here, and I talk about this a lot. It's the hustle culture. We spent so many years like go, 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 do.
Yes.
And it flies in the face of what we need to do, which is mindfulness.
And I talk a lot about the strategic hustle. Like the hustle energy in and of itself is not bad, but overdone it becomes a liability.
It does.
So strategic hustle, that may be one or two main goals. And one of the things that I get my leaders to do when I'm coaching with them is to have a positive morning ritual, because the most successful people in the world have that. And yes, that could include, meditation, exercise, but really getting focused on that question, how do I want to show up? Who do I want to be today? What do I want my impact to be?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and let's stay on that for a minute, because I like that positive morning ritual, because you read a lot about that, and I know you write a lot, and you and your husband speak a lot, and you're out there pushing your message. But there's so many people that are out there going, you have to do it this way. What I love about the work you're doing is it's their morning ritual. It's not everybody else's. It's really trying to figure out what's going to allow you to show up. So it's very customizable.
Yes. And when you take time to do that, even if it's 9 minutes, you're going to be able to direct your day a lot better, and that puts you in the driver's seat of your day and ultimately your life. So it might be sitting out on the deck with a cup of tea, listening to the birds. It might be meditating. It might be exercise. You get to choose what you want to do.
I think that's so critical because, if we're going to be mindful, we're also mindful of what doesn't work for us. And we need, because I read the article. I'm not a morning person. I get up early, but I'm not a morning person. And I'll read the articles like, all of this. I love anytime they say all the successful people are, they're up at 4 a.m. They're in the gym from 5 to 6, and they're, and I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? Like that's like would not put me in a mindful state. It put me in a crazy mindful state, but the ability to choose what works for us and what allows us to be present and allows us to be mindful, I think is an overlooked thing in society today.
What so many people are doing now, which sets them up for failure for their day, is they wake up late, they're running crazy all over the house, they're jumping into their car, racing through traffic, cursing people out on the way.
I didn't curse anybody out on the way. I just want you guys to know that.
But it's no way to start your day, and then how are you going to show up? You may have really good intentions, but your impact is not going to be as clear and powerful.
Well, and it's the impact is what most of as leaders, that's what we're after. We are trying to have an impact, a positive impact. But I think leaders have impact whether they're good or bad. Sometimes some leaders have a very negative impact on people.
Yes.
But I think to be, intentional and mindful and really present with what you're doing. So what's been your biggest and I do want to get into your 4 C's of mindful leadership because I love letters that make things easy to remember.
I know, right?
But before we get into that, like what's been the biggest you've been doing this for a few decades now, and
don't date me there, Krista.
I'm not dating girl. I'm your age.
Since I was a toddler.
Since we started when we were 3.
Yes.
So but having done this work, this important work for that long, what's been the most rewarding thing that you've seen, not just from an individual client, but just kind of the work that you're doing, society as a whole? What can we look forward to? Like sometimes we just need some good news, Angela.
Yes.
We gotta hear the good stuff. So what's been the good stuff in your body of work?
I tell you, there's so much, Kristen. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on the good news of mindful leadership and mindful mojo. Let's do that, y'all. One of the things that really touches my heart is when I get an email or a conversation with a family member and they say, "What did you do with my dad?" Like he's a whole different person.
That.
So it's not just like the workplace culture, but family members who've known this person up close and personal, and they're saying, we have a whole different life now. What did you do with my wife? She's just so different. We have such a better marriage because of the work you did on her leadership in the workplace. That is so gratifying because you begin to see the ripple effects that it's having. And then, of course, on the children. Right?
It has so much. I had a client of mine recently. She said, and it was so funny. She's a C-suite executive, and she goes, "I've got an odd question." I was like, "What?" And she goes, "My husband wants to know if we can all have dinner because he really likes what you're working on." But it was the same thing. It was just how that ripple effect, and we don't really think about it when we're working with executives and business owners and all that. Is how it ripples in the world.
It really does.
Isn't that fun, though?
It is so fun. It is so fun. And in fact, I have gotten so many requests in the last year and a half from executives like YPO and executive groups to come in and talk to these leaders about mindful parenting. Like that's
I think
on
that
their,
would be a big one.
Yeah, it's on their radar, right? So they want
Yeah.
us to come in and help them in the workplace, but they're also, the work-life balance and trying to find that, balance there can be difficult.
And it's hard, I think, I'd be a good test case for that one because I feel like I do that well professionally, the mindful leadership. I think as a parent, and my kids are older now, unfortunately, I didn't do that as a parent. And that trickle-down effect that we were supposed to have from learning this professionally never trickled down for me. So I think the way I parent my child, I have one child still at home, I think the way I parent her is very different than I parented my older 2.
Right.
And it's not that I'm a different person.
Yeah.
It's just I think I'm more in tune and more mindful of everything I'm doing from a parent. Because I was very authoritative with the older 2.
Yes.
And you don't get that time back, right? So I think especially with like a YPO organization, oh my gosh, you guys could do incredible work with that because it's so needed. Like we're so busy that we aren't present anymore.
Well, a couple of things that you said, Kristen, as we evolve and grow, we know better. As Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. So I always encourage people to give themselves grace when it comes to their parenting because, we were young when we started parenting. Yeah. And so it's wonderful that you're on the other side of it and can look back now and realize, here's what I would like to do moving forward.
I'm pretty good I wasn't always good about giving me grace. My coach helped me with that on giving grace to yourself because it is. You look back and when you learn and evolve, you learn all these things and you think back, you're like, oh my gosh, how cool would parenting have been? Marriage, dating, friendships, business.
All of it.
Corporate, all of that if we had just paid attention to this earlier on.
Yes, and what I'm seeing in the workplace now, and I'm wondering if you are too in the corporate culture, is that we're looking at leaders now not just as business leaders, but as a whole person and understanding that it all impacts one another. Yeah. It's not the 90s anymore where they said, park it at the door.
Right.
Boards are understanding that leaders are human beings too.
And I think that's interesting because, we've gone through so many styles of leadership, having been in business for, since we were 2, we evolve. We went from, dictator type leadership to the, separate the silos. You got your work life and your home, and I used to, I remember people saying, well, I have two hats. I've got my work hat on. I'm like, I've literally got one hat. I'm a what you see is what you get type of person.
Yes.
So that was always hard for me. This is way more natural for kind of how I am. But you kind of forget how it all trickles out.
It all works in tandem with each other, and that's why the term authentic leadership is making such a headway too, because people want to know who you really are. Because if we think about building cultures of trust, they want to trust that you're showing up in all of who you are.
Right, it's true, and I think we're getting there. I mean, I think where do you see the trend? I was going to ask kind of what has been the tough part, but I'd really rather focus on the positive. Where's this trend going? Where do you see 10 years from now? What do our leaders look like? The people that are coming up today. So if somebody's listening and they're like, I am working my way up.
Yes.
What do they? And I had this conversation I was with a couple of an advisory board I sat on last night, and we were having that discussion at dinner. It's like the leaders coming up, like they're trying. They don't know how to balance empowering versus stepping in and doing.
Yes.
So they're still right on, and these are young leaders. These are 20s, 30s.
Yes.
And I mean, what do you tell them? Where do you see this trend in leadership going?
Well, what I love about these younger generations is that they prioritize their well-being, and that's not something that leaders were ever encouraged to do. And so I do see that well-being is going to be central to good leadership in the future, and I think these cultures or these generations are going to drive that. And I think it's very, very exciting what's on the horizon.
So I'm going to ask the question. Which I think a lot of people are asking the way because I agree with you. And I think this generation, and I have children this generation, and they are prioritizing well-being. I think for older generations, and I say older, I mean my age. I'm literally throwing myself under the bus here. I think we look at that sometimes and go, what do you mean you want to work from home? What do you mean you need to take an hour to go to the gym? Like, we look at it as a disconnect.
Yeah.
Because we weren't raised that way. And my oldest and I have had this discussion I'm like, I'm trying to learn more by asking questions. I'm not challenging you. I'm just like, how, so there's a balance.
There's a balance.
And there's memes all over the place and like parody videos all over the place. Like, I don't know that I want to do that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I think it's hard for like leaders of those of us who are still working, raised a different way, totally to embrace it. Because I'm all about, self-care and all of that. And I think you need to bring your whole self to the office.
But overdone, it becomes a liability. And that's what I see a lot of these younger generations doing, where, you also in the workplace, you need to be committed and reliable and accountable.
Right.
And that's also a part of mindful leadership. So it's not just going to the gym and meditating. It's showing up and being responsible. And so you've got to find that sweet spot.
I think you're right. Yeah. It's showing up. It's accountability. Yeah. It's all of that. So I think it is a sweet spot. And you said taken too far, it's a liability. I think anything taken too far is a liability.
Absolutely. 100%.
I'm a big strengths finder person with Gallup. I think you and I talked about that before.
We did.
I love those, but if you're all in on your strengths, it can become a, strength too far is a weakness.
Yeah, totally.
So I think a lot of it, but it's, okay, so the trend is going to balance it all out.
I think it's going to balance it out. Yeah, and I think we're just all continuing to grow and evolve, and who knows what's on the horizon. I'm curious to see what will happen.
All right, so for the younger people, like you said, you've got to just be aware, be accountable, show up.
Yes.
Be your whole self, but have work.
Yeah, it's not appropriate to say, I've got to knock off at 2 p.m. every Thursday because I have my yoga class, unless that is what was presented to you at the beginning of your interview.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of companies are grappling with this, with these different generations in the workplace.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, when I was still in corporate and ran, our firm, one of my team members, she just didn't like traffic. It wasn't because of yoga, but she's like, I want to be out of here by 3. She's like, I'll get here at 6 a.m., but I want to be out of here by 3.
Yeah.
And it made sense. And she got everything done. The performance was there. So my leadership style has always been, here's the job I need you to do.
Yes.
I will empower you, help you to do it however I can.
Yes.
My expectation is that it's done.
That it's done
well.
Yes.
The parameters, we'll figure that out.
I love that.
Yeah. So I think that's critical. So for people like my age, our age, that, let's look at this. How do we open ourselves to that? How do we best support leaders of the future? So our current leaders, how do we best support the coming uppers?
I think we've got to have a flexibility mindset for the older generations and for the younger generations too. I think what is happening somewhat in our workplace cultures is that one generation thinks the other generation has no idea what they're talking about.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Say that again for the people in the back row. It's true.
Yeah.
Because I've heard younger people, I'm talking to you, my children. I've heard them say, well, you don't know what it's like. And then I got pushback for telling them they don't know what it's like.
Yeah, and it's like there's a blend here. There's some wisdom happening across experiences and perspectives, and to be able to honor everyone's perspective and let them have a seat at the table and voice what they think will work and try it out. You know, it's not we're learning, especially over the last couple of decades, that we're not clocking hours in. It's about performance, like you just said. Can I deliver the results? How you deliver it is up to you.
Yeah.
And people work differently. We all have different styles and approaches.
Well, and Lisa just said evolution of mindfulness I just lost it. Evolution of mindfulness. It's an evolution.
It's an evolution.
Is just you're not like, it's not all of a sudden you're mindful and then you're done.
That's right.
But talking about leaders, Ray just commented and said people stay or leave based on the leaders, not the company. And I think, Ray, I think that's a good point because
really good point.
People are, it's a culture thing.
And those exit interviews are super valuable. If your organization is not doing exit interviews, you'll never learn why you're not retaining those employees.
Yeah, it's true because so many times people leave and good people, and I was talking with a group of friends that are in leadership roles recently, and one of them was talking about somebody that left, and she was like, it was for a great opportunity. And we had that discussion about her leaving, and I was so excited for her next opportunity because she didn't have it here.
Yes.
And I think to me, I was like, that's leadership, to know that, man, I can't develop this person. I can't have the opportunities for this person, but she's got a great opportunity over here. So I think that's really good. I love it. Now, all right, so you've talked about your 4 C's of mind, and I am all about things that make it easy to remember.
Yes.
Because I can do that if we easy. So 4 C's of mindful leadership.
So the 4 C's are calm, compassion, clarity, and choice. And we could talk for hours about each one of them. But we know if you can regulate your stress, you're going to be a better performer and you're going to have greater well-being. We know that leaders who are more compassionate have higher performing teams and better workplace culture. We know that through meditation and the neuroscience that you're going to get your clarity as a leader. And then finally, making those choices, being intentional, showing up, super powerful. We all get to choose who we're going to be each day.
Now, do you think, I love that. So calm, compassion, clarity, and choice.
Yes.
I know which one's the toughest for me because it keeps coming up.
Yes.
In the work I'm doing with my coach. And is it different? I'm assuming it's different for everybody, but is there one in your work that you've seen show up more than others with the leaders you work with?
It's all over the map, but what I have been fascinated by in these C-suite groups is they really want to talk about compassion. I think they really want to work on that. They've been taught to be hard-edged, that's how you get ahead. Yep. But really, being compassionate doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean being an enabler, but it means having a heart.
And I think, do you see gender differences with that? Because we've done a lot of episodes, because I'm thinking women are programmed a little bit more on the compassion side, but we tend to take it too far.
Sometimes.
And get to the enable side. And then a lot of my male leaders have had more I don't know if I'm stereotyping. That would be me to stereotype probably, but
I've seen it both ways, Kristen, and I've seen, especially since the women's lib movement, that women have been taught to overvalue masculine traits.
Yes.
And so they really work on developing and strengthening those. So you see a lot of masculine energy embodied in a female.
We may have to have you back for that one because we talked about this recently. The masculine, feminine energy is a topic we're definitely going to cover because it keeps coming up for me. Same thing. I was guilty of that, poster child for that. I was like, you're in a male-dominated field. You have to act like the guys, talk like the guys, dress like the guys, everything. I'm like, I am not going to, nothing against Brooks Brothers, but I'm like, I'm not a Brooks Brothers suit type of girl. But it was, if you didn't embody that, you weren't going to move. Now, I think that's starting to change and has changed a lot over the years.
It has.
But 20 years ago,
we were wearing suspenders and ties to the workplace as women.
Yeah.
And we were taught that.
I didn't do the tie thing.
I didn't either.
I know. I protest on that. But it's true. We were. So now that you think about it, compassion, I think, does come naturally to a lot of women, but we do frequently or have over the years suppressed that a little bit in the workplace.
Absolutely.
I like that. So calm, compassion, clarity, and choice.
Yes, those are the 4 C's.
So when you're working with somebody, how do we start to assess where they are with those things?
I would just like to have a conversation and talk to them a little bit about the content and see what they think. And then I also like to talk to their employees, their peers, their bosses, and their family members, their kids,
so
who they're married to.
You get all up in their business.
Yes, I think so.
I love that.
That's how we get a real picture of someone. You can't just talk to the person because we all have blind spots.
Yeah.
Everyone has blind spots.
I think, it was funny. Out of those 4, and I'll talk about this. I'm pretty open on the show. So clarity is the one for me that's been coming up professionally, which I was really surprised at. Really surprised. Some of my, meditation, all the stuff that kept coming up and the work I've done with Lisa, and she's like, it's clarity. I'm like, I'm pretty clear, and she's like, what's interesting is, I have clarity around here, and I'm trying to dictate too much. She's like, you got to let go and just say, I know where I'm going, and then just kind of be willing to let things happen, let things evolve.
Exactly. If control is not a friend of clarity.
That was the thing, and I think that's what it is. I am fiercely clear.
Yes.
But the way you just said that's good but I also want to control every little step professionally and every, what clients I take on and what I don't, and this and that, and who comes my way, and how I, show up at meetings with clients and prospects and all that. And a lot of it is, I think the more you try to control, the less you feel your gut, your intuition.
Exactly.
You're not
That's
being
it.
as mindful.
That's it.
Perhaps as
we've got to
you
learn
should.
to trust ourselves, but also trust the bigger mystery of life. Whatever you want to call that, we cannot dictate how everything is going to go.
I agree, because I have tried. I have tried, and that was why this one kept coming up for me. It's not a lack of clarity. I have extreme clarity. It was trying to control the steps towards what I'm clear on.
Yes.
And I think for a lot of leaders, that's tough. Maybe not. Maybe I'm a unicorn here, but I think that's tough for a lot of people.
I think it is, and I think the superfluous distractions and noise of the world and the busyness does not help. And that's where calm and clarity come together as a team, because you cannot have clarity if you're not making space in your life, in your calendar for calm. You have to have that if you want to tap into your gut instinct and your intuition.
It's, I think, taking time in your calendar, and I'm a big person of, we have time for whatever we need to do. I never buy the time excuse. We have time for the things that are important. So to gain that clarity, to take time to be calm.
Yes.
To work on our compassion. Those are big, big, big things.
Huge. And what choices are we making? A lot of people are on autopilot around their choices, and they're letting other people, other events, other people's agendas run their choices. And we've got to take a survey, landscape of what choices we're making, and are they working for us anymore?
So I love this. So 4 C's of mindful leadership: calm, compassion, clarity, and choice.
Yes.
Those are big. I think we could do almost an episode on each one of those.
Let's do that.
I know. We could totally do that. We are going to have Angela back
series.
for sure. So if people are hearing this going, oh my gosh, I need more of this. I need more Angela in my life. How do they get a hold of you?
They can go to my website at pathtobestself.com.
Right? Pathtobestself.com.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice. I like that.
Thank
I
you.
love it.
Thank you.
So we will definitely have Angela back with us, because we are just scratching the surface here of all these. I'd love to talk about each of the 4. Would love to talk about the masculine-feminine dynamic and how that plays into leadership. But thank you so much for being with us
me,
today.
Kristen.
And thank you guys. We're going to have her back. We're going to talk and explore a lot more in this topic, because I think it is a great one, a very, very important one. And we are so very glad that you were here with us today to join us. So until next week, get out there, do great things, and keep having fun. We'll see you next week on another episode of Renew.